All right.
All right.
Welcome, everyone.
I'll go tell everyone you're here.
Great. Hi, I'll take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Ben Nelson. I'm one of the co-founders and one of the lead instructors for Lambda School. Yeah, I've been teaching for a long time and done a lot of programming, full stack software engineer, done a lot of JavaScript, and yeah, this is what I love to do. So I'm excited to be here and take some time to be able to teach you guys some JavaScript and some ES6. This is the foundation that we start with in our course. We our full course is 6 months long, and we start from kind of a high level and then dig deeper as the course goes along. So we start with JavaScript, start at a little more high of an abstraction, and then over the 6 months we move deeper and deeper and get into C++ and the operating system, get closer to the hardware. But yeah, this is where it all begins.
Are you using this mic or this mic?
Yeah, it should still pick you up.
Okay, cool.
So, talking to my ear.
Hey guys, it's Austin. Just wanted to say hi quick. We'll wait for a couple minutes for people to trickle in. And yeah, I'll be on Slack. Any questions, use the questions channel on Slack. I'll post that in just a minute, so it'll arrive at about the time you guys get it, because there is a little delay. And yeah, thanks for joining us.
All right, so we're gonna jump in. Okay, let's. All right, just a moment. Okay, and there's our infinity mirror. Okay. All right. So last time that you were so last night you had Ryan Hamblin, one of our first instructors that we hired. He came in and talked to you guys about just some of the fundamentals of the language, basic things, variables, numbers, and strings, and how to do like addition, subtraction, multiplication, mathematical operators, how to do logging things to the console, just some of those little basic fundamentals. And he touched on if statements a little bit too. So that was, yeah, he touched on just like a lot of just kind of those basic pieces. And then today we're going to get into something called control flow. And so this is how we can make our program branch and repeat and execute a piece of code over and over again for a set number of times. And just these are some of the tools that are available that can help us make some more interesting things. We also have some stuff. We're going to talk a little bit about some logical operators and how we can compose logical statements to be able to be able to create some more meaningful types of programs, types of applications. So to go back a little bit, we start with JavaScript because it's a little bit easier to learn than other programming languages. It's incredibly powerful, and there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do with it. JavaScript is currently being used to make native mobile apps using a tool called React Native. That's what, if you have Facebook on your phone or Instagram, it's made using React Native. There's a tool called what is it called? Electron that uses JavaScript to create desktop applications. So if you're using Slack, which many of you have downloaded it and not using the web client, and if you have it downloaded on your computer, then it's made using JavaScript, actually. And so it's written in JavaScript and gets compiled into another language. JavaScript can be written on like chips and if you wanted to program drones or robots, things like that, there's a tool called Tessel that lets you do that. You can use JavaScript in your browser to create web applications. So when I say a web application, think of something like Facebook or Amazon or Slack in the browser, or just any website where you have to log in and there's a lot of logic and a lot of moving pieces and it's pretty complex. Facebook has many engineers that have to work on their client-side application because it seems simple from the surface, but it's incredibly complex once you dig into it. And then now with Node, you can use JavaScript on the back end. You can create servers with it. And so we teach client-side development. So we teach React and how to create web applications. We teach how to make mobile applications using React Native, the same tools that Facebook uses for all their mobile apps. And a lot of other companies are adopting it now. How to make cross-platform mobile apps, which is pretty cool. So you can write a code base and have most of the code reusable between your Android and iOS app, which is pretty cool. And then with JavaScript, we also teach backend development. And so we start out very high level. We teach you how to build things and how to make things. And so you're doing a lot of like actually building. And it's very visual, and then towards the end of the course, we get deeper and deeper, and so then we start getting into computer architecture and operating systems and memory management, and we teach C++ and C, and we get into those fundamentals, those topics that are covered in computer science courses that are important for software engineers to understand that the boot camps don't teach, and so. We can do that because we're longer. So we take 6 months of full-time study so we can actually go deeper with it. But JavaScript is the first step, and JavaScript is how you can first start to develop this intuition for how programs work. And this is a great, gentle introduction. So some of the lower level languages are a little trickier to write. JavaScript's a little bit easier to learn. That might seem surprising. You might be thinking this is incredibly difficult, and it is. It's tricky to learn this at first. But JavaScript is a great way to kind of ease yourself into the pool. All right, so let me make sure I got Slack up too, so I can spot any questions you guys are asking. So. All right. Anyway, yeah, so fun stuff. So now let's dive in and let's start talking about some of the concepts that were covered, some of the new ones. So inside of a program, again, it's read from, you can think of it as left to right, top to bottom. So like reading a book in English, the code gets read from left to right, top to bottom. So if I write, const x is equal to 5, and then I say console.log x like this down here. It's a little basic, but we're just reviewing some of the principles. It's read left to right. So const is a keyword, and when the system sees the word const, it knows, okay, I'm going to make a new variable. So it sees the word x. Okay, this is the variable name. The equal sign means assignment, and then we assign it to the number 5. So the reference x, the variable x, is the number 5, and there's a spot in memory. And when we say memory, that's the RAM on your computer. That's the short-term memory. It's very, very fast, but it doesn't. If the power turns off, the memory is wiped clean, or it's just not. It's not persistent. So. All right, so we create this variable in memory, then we come down here, and then we reference a global object, and we'll be getting into objects later in another lesson later this week. But we have an object, and we call a function on it, a method. We call this a method. A function on an object is called a method. And then we use 2 parentheses to invoke the function. And again, we're going to talk a lot about functions later in the week. But then we pass it in an argument, which is the number 5, which is the variable x, which refers to the number 5. And then we print that out. So again, it's read left to right, top to bottom. So in the typical execution of your program, you're just gonna go down, and every single line is going to be executed. Let's say that you have some type of branching condition where maybe the value of a variable, depending on what its value is, you want to go one way in your code or another way. So kind of like a fork in the road. You want to have a fork in the road, and based off of what a value is, you want to either direct the flow of the program down the left path or the right path. And so that's an if statement. So Ryan went over these yesterday, but we're gonna talk about some different conditions that we can use in here to build some more complex if statements and to achieve some more complex logic. So one of these is we can talk about less than or greater than. So something we can do is we can say if 5 is, or well, what we can do is say if x is greater than 2, console.log x is greater than 2. And then we'll put an else. You can chain these together. So if, and then it will run this block, else console.log x is not greater than, or x is less than or equal to 2. Okay. So we're going to start here. So if x is greater than 2, then we're going to run this part. Else, we're going to run this section. So if I run that, we're going to see x is greater than 2. Obviously, because x is greater than 5. This is obviously very simple, but maybe a little obvious. But but this is anyway. This is a way that we can go in and approach and look at this if statement. So if we write if, this is a keyword, just like const, it's a reserved keyword, and then we have parentheses. Inside of it, we put what's called a condition. So this is a condition or an expression, either way. And this expression is going to be evaluated at runtime. So when the program runs, it's going to see the x, and it's going to go find the variable x, and it's going to take the value that's there, and it's going to plug it in. And then it's going to say, all right, is 5 greater than 2? And if it is, this evaluates to the Boolean value true. And then if there's a true Boolean value in the parentheses, then the first block runs. If this is false, the first block is skipped. It does not run at all. And then the second block is run. The else block is run. So right here, so if true, this will run. And so if I run this again, if I just have true in there, we see x is greater than 2. If I type in false, see x is less than or equal to 2. Okay. So we'll say if x is greater than 2. All right, so we run that. Okay, x is greater than 2. So now something we could do, let's set x equal to 2. Run it, x is less than or equal to 2. So again, we see that the 2 is swapped in, and we see that 2 is greater than 2. That's not true. 2 is not greater than 2. 2 is equal to 2. And so this right here would evaluate false. The second block runs. So this is just kind of the start of this if else, this all right, I'm seeing some comments to zoom in a little bit. I'll zoom in a little so you guys can maybe see this a little bit better. So so if and else, we have kind of this branching fork in the road. So again, you kind of think of it as like branching off to the left or off to the right. So there's some other things that we can check here too. We can check to see if something is, well, actually, okay, all right, we're gonna back up a step. We're gonna talk about something else real quick. So, all right, so that was just like basic if else. All right, so now what we're gonna talk about, what if you have multiple conditions that you want to check that are true. So let's say that we want to, let's say we wanted to check to see if x is, x is it greater than 0. Let's say that we also want to make sure that it is less than 5. So in order to run this block, we want x to be greater than 0 and less than 5. And so we want to be able to combine two conditions. Like we want both of them to be true. And so there's a way that we can do that, and it's with these double ampersands. So these are called ampersands, and we do 2 of them together, and it's the logical operator and. So double ampersands usually represented like this, A and D, and. So it means that the condition on the left, or the expression on the left and the expression on the right, both need to be true. So we can say x is less than 5. So if x is greater than 0 and x is less than 5, then run this block of code right here. So both of these conditions, both of these expressions have to be true. So x is greater than 2 and x is less than 5, or x is greater than 0, I should say. So x is greater than 0 and x is less than 5. So a lot of x's and zeros and stuff like that. Let's see, yeah, I just increased it. So yeah, there's a lot of x's and zeros, some math stuff going on, but don't worry about it. Like you don't have to be amazing at math to be able to pick up programming. Like you'll pick up what you need to know on the way. So don't be too concerned about needing to have a specific level of math. Even more?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, all right. So x is greater than 0. 0 is less than 5. Okay. So, all right. So we run that, and anyway, the string prints out because it. Anyway, the string prints out because it's. Anyway, it satisfies both conditions. So if we were to if we were to move x to 6, we're going to see that nothing prints. Out of the range. Okay. So if we run this now, we see x is outside of the range. So between 0 and 5. Okay. So it's very, very common to use these types of like ampersands. So are these types of operators. Okay. So this is the AND operator. We're going to talk about another one, which is called the OR operator. So in order for the OR operator, in order for the entire expression to evaluate to true, then in order for the entire expression to evaluate to true, then it let's see. In order for it to well, let's see. Sorry. Yeah, in order for the entire expression to evaluate to true, then only one expression, only one of the two expressions needs to be true. So one of them can be false, but then the other one can be true. Sorry, hold on just a second. Okay, so all right, so OR is so with AND, both sides have to be true. With OR, only one of them has to be true. So if I do true and false, run that. Okay, we see that this first one, x is greater than 0. We'll say first statement and second statement. So if true or false, then run the first statement. Okay. And if I do ampersands, it's because this entire thing right here evaluates to false. And in fact, if I actually type this in right here, I can do true and false, and the entire thing evaluates to false. If I do true and true, the entire thing evaluates to false. If I do true or false, it evaluates to true. If I do false or true, it evaluates to true. False or false evaluates to false. So so it will check the expressions on both sides, and then the entire expression will evaluate to either true or false. And so it's something where like like this is a lot to cover. We move at a pretty fast pace, and the idea is that these lectures will be there as a reference you can go back to, and then you'll have this community within the Slack channel that you can be able to ask questions to. So we do move at a pretty quick pace. So if this is feeling difficult or a lot, or like we're moving pretty fast, then just it takes time, it takes practice. The more you can practice, the better and the faster you'll be able to pick this up. So all right, okay, so there's these basic conditions if true and false allows for this basic flow. Okay, all right, so and or one that I wanted to talk about, or two that I want to talk about. The last one is the not operator, logical not operator. So the exclamation mark. And so what the exclamation mark does is it reverses the condition, or it reverses the Boolean value of the expression, so what it evaluates to. So false, it's going to flip it to be true. And so if I run this now, we're going to see the first statement is printed out. Okay, if I flip this to true, and we see the second statement is printed out. So this gets turned into false, the exclamation mark. They'll call this a bang. And so it reverses it. So if I say, if x is greater than 2, and then if I put an exclamation mark on it, saying if if x is not greater than 2. And so this is kind of like saying if x is less than or equal to 2 is essentially what this is saying right here. So, and yeah, confusing use of exclamation, right? This is a confusing use, and you're not going to usually write it this way, but it's just to kind of show that, showing you what it does. So it flips the Boolean value, flips it back and forth. Okay. All right. So now let's, so if x is equal to 5, say if x is greater than 0 and x does not equal -1. Log true. Okay. So 5, all right. So is 5 greater than 0? Yes. And is x not equal, and is 5 not equal to -1? It's not. So this right here is, again, another use of the not sign. So not equal, is x not equal to this? And so this evaluates the true. So 5 and then not equal. So this right here evaluates the true if they're not equal to each other. So anyway, so you can see how this entire expression. So is 5 greater than 0? Yes. Is 5 not equal to -1? Yes. And so both of these are true. So the entire thing becomes true. And then the if statement will run this block. So that's the general flow there. And so with combinations of and or, and not, you can get some more sophisticated things. Usually you're not doing it with like numbers and stuff like this. Usually it's, usually you're using these operators with, maybe you're checking the property, like if there's a user in your database who's an admin user, and you want to check to see, is the user an admin user, and then, so that's when like you'll be checking for like if it's true or false or something like that. So, so you're not doing it. I don't know. You don't do tons of stuff where you're doing these like complex things with numbers like that. Like that doesn't usually come up a lot. But this is just a way for us to really break down and show the fundamentals. Okay. Yeah. So sometimes you could say, is it equal to false? There's times that you'd want to do it one way, times where you'd want to do it other ways. It just really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So I don't want to dive into that too much right now, just because I have some other stuff I need to get to. But let's see. Well, actually, yeah. So if we go back to the previous example, is x not equal to -1? Yeah, there's some times where maybe saying is something not equal to something else, like is a little less ideal than explicitly checking to see if something is. And with these logical operators and with Boolean operators, you can like flip them back and forth. So, but anyway, this is going a little deeper than we need to go right now. This is going a little more advanced. So just kind of high level, just like and, or, and the negative sign, like those are the things that you should know at this level. This is something that we go much more in depth in our course. So don't be too concerned about this, like, right now at this point. Yeah. So let's, so some other ranges, that I want to talk about. So if we have, x is less than 0, we could also do x is x greater than or equal to 0. So if x is 0 right here, we're going to see true printed out. And so this is greater than or equal to. We can do less than or equal to. So -1 is -1 less than or equal to 0. True is 0 less than or equal to 0. True, so that's true as well. So less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. And this we use a lot. We use a lot of this when we get into for loops, which is what we're going to talk about now. So if statements give you a way to have this this branching logic in your application. You can kind of go down one path or go down a different path. now, let's say that you have a piece of your program that you want to repeat. You have a block of code that you want to run for a set amount of times. Maybe you want this specific piece of code to run 10 times, or maybe you have a collection of items that you want this piece of code to run. You want it to run on each item in the collection. And we'll be getting into, we'll be getting into more, let's see. Yeah, so we'll be getting more into. Sorry, I was looking in general, so I missed a couple questions. Let's see. I see Austin's in there answering some stuff. Let me just scan it real quick. Let's see. Yeah, so if you have an opening curly brace, you always have to have a closing curly brace. So in JavaScript, I think this will be valid right here. This will run. You could also put this right here, and that will run as well, and that's valid. And so something we talk about in our class is like style guides. And so every company, they'll have different style guides, and you will have a specific format that you'll need to have your code match. And so different companies will have you write it different ways. Generally, this is pretty common to have it written this way. In some languages, you'll see them drop it down onto the second line. But yeah, so we're going to write it like this. This is pretty common within JavaScript. Yeah, the parentheses, I think they're, yeah, that's required. I always see it written that way, and that's generally like considered more legible. But yeah, oh yeah. So people are asking about double equal signs versus triple equal signs. Just general rule of thumb is always use triple equal. So just always use triple equals. Don't use double equals. With double equals, there's some weird type conversion stuff that's going on there, and the rules around it are difficult to predict and hard to remember. And it's generally most style guides will tell you, like most companies, they'll tell their engineers not to use double equals with JavaScript. They just use triple equals. So so don't ever use double equals, just as a rule of thumb. If you want to go look into it, that can be a good thing. You can go research. Look up on like Stack Overflow or something. There's like a bunch of like little things, and so triple equals will check for like do they explicitly match. Double equals will try to turn them into the same type. So like if one isn't a number, it'll try to turn it into a number and do some stuff like that. But yeah, it's yeah, I'm kind of vague on it myself, just because like I've never used double equals, and like at all my companies, like my senior like if I use a double equals in a code review, like that would be called out on that. Like you shouldn't really ever use it. So, yeah, so there's kind of some funny stuff that goes on with it. Yeah, and does not equals essentially like right here, x does not equal 0. So if x is any value that is not 0, this statement will be true. True prints out. But if it's 0, then nothing prints, because it is equal to 0. So this statement is false, and so that's what it's doing there. Yeah. So yeah. So and then some of the stuff with like curly braces and indentation, it's different between Ruby and Python and other languages. So the stuff I'm telling you here is JavaScript specific. So keep this in mind. This is all specific to JavaScript. And so if you go watch a tutorial like with another language or even within JavaScript, people have different opinions about different styles. And so I'll write code differently from other senior level developers in other places. So you'll see it written differently, and a lot of it comes down to preference. Some people leave off the semicolons in JavaScript. Because it doesn't technically break it. It can lead to some weird bugs, but anyway, that's a discussion that's for another day. Okay, great questions. All right. Okay, let's look at the for loop. Okay, so if we have a block of code that we want to iterate, or we have some type of We have some block of code that we want to run over and over and over again. That's what a for loop is for. So a for loop has 3 parts to it, 3 sections. So the first one, we define a variable that we're going to use as like a counter. That's how you can think of it. So we're going to define a counter, and it's separated by a semicolon. So it's kind of funny syntax, but so we define a counter variable. The next one is, this is a truth statement, and as long as this statement is true, then the loop is going to keep running. And so this is going to be checked after each cycle of the loop, each iteration of the loop. And so we're going to do I is less than 10 right here, do less than or equal to 10. I actually have I start at 1. And then here we're going to say, what do we do to our increment, or our count variable? What do we want to do with it after the end of each loop? And so so the way that this runs, console.log I, is we're going to create I as a variable. We're going to come in, and we're going to run this block of code, everything between the 2 curly braces. We're going to come out, we're going to print out I, which is 1. The for loop ends, and then we're going to increment I. We're going to increment I, and then we're going to evaluate if this truth statement is still true. So if we run this, we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 gets printed out. So essentially what's happening is we're printing out 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6. And this might happen before, but then the way that the postfix operators are set, anyway, so don't worry about that too much of that. If that's something you're thinking about, we can talk about that later. But so with this for loop, we have let I equal to 1. So I starts at 1, and then as long as I is less than or equal to 10, we're going to keep iterating, and then we're going to do I plus plus. And so we're going to, after each cycle of the loop, we're going to increment I by 1. And so eventually I reaches 11, and then that turns this to false, it breaks it, and so then the loop ends. And so if I do console.log I out here, and run this, actually, because I is part of the for loops scope. So const and let are scoped to for loops and if statements in addition to functions, but we talk about that later. So if I did let I right here, and then I set I is equal to 1, and then as long as I is less than or equal to 10, then run this code, and then increment I by 1. So plus plus, increase it by 1. That's what this plus plus thing is doing. This plus plus, it takes a number and it just increases it by 1. It's a very, very common type of operation that we do in programming, increasing a number by 1, like a counter that comes up all over the place. And so there's it's a shortcut. So plus plus. So if I run this, again, we're going to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then right here, we print out 11 because I was increased to 11, and that's what broke the for loop. So again, if we were to walk through this a little bit more slowly. So I starts out at 1. We come down in, we log 1, we come down to the end, and then we go 1 plus plus. So 1 becomes 2. And then so we come in here and we check, all right, is 2 less than or equal to 10? It is. So we come down in, then we log out 2 to the console. Come down, all right, let's increase 2 so it becomes 3. So yeah, so it becomes 3 up here. So let's go check. Oh man, here we go. Okay, great. All right. So I hit the back button. So 3 is less than or equal to 10. So that's still true. So again, this evaluates to true, just like the conditions in the expressions we were looking at before. When we were looking at if statements, it evaluates to true. So 3 is less than or equal to 10. So this becomes true, literally becomes true. Like it literally becomes the Boolean value true. It gets evaluated to that. And so then we come down in and console.log I, which it was increased to 3. and then we're going to come down, and then let's go 3 plus plus. And so I is now 4. So it's going to repeat. It's going to repeat this cycle. So we have this counter variable that lets us increment it. It lets us loop and run a block of code for a specified number of times. So that's, yeah, those are the basics of how for loop works. Write this out again. Again, 3 parts in the for loop. The first one, we have our counter variable. The second one is the condition that needs to be true or false. If I wrote this and did true, this will always be true, and it's never going to be false. You know, or if I did this where I said, as long as, if I did I is greater than 0, well, I starts at 1, and then we're going to keep increasing it. So I is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And this will always be true, and this will never, ever be false. And so what's going to happen is this is called an infinite loop. And the program will not stop, and my browser will actually crash if I run this. My browser will freeze, and I'll get like a little like loading icon. Yeah, and so this will... anyway, so it'll freeze everything up. So I is, anyway, so we'll say as long as I is less than or equal to 10, console.log I, clear. All right, run that out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, so let and const, we went over that. Var let and const went over that in yesterday's lecture. So I would encourage you guys to go and check that out. I can talk about it for a second, but I have some new material I need to cover. So I would encourage you to go and review that recording if you have questions about that. Basically, const is a variable that can't be reassigned. So const x is equal to 5. If I did x is equal to 10, this creates an error. If I did x plus plus, that would create an error. Both of those are illegal. You can't do that. If I switch this to let, then that works. You can reassign it, and you can increment it. So just rule of thumb, don't use var anymore. Just use const by default. If you can't use const, then use let. So start by using a const, and then if you find that you have to reassign a variable, then use lets. But just so that's like the rule of thumb with it, and we can get deeper into this discussion like later. And this is something we cover in a lot of depth in our course. But just by default, just use const, and then if you get an error because you're like trying to reassign a variable or do something like that, then use let. And again, I'm talking fast here. You can come back and rewatch the recording if you get lost on this at all. But the const and let are also block scoped. So that means that inside of if statements, if so const x is equal to 5. If I tried to do console.log x right here, this would not work. X is undefined. X is not defined, and so x lives inside of this if statement. It's the same with for loops. Vars did not behave that way. Vars only respected functions. But again, this is a scoping thing, and we're going to talk about scoping a lot when we get into functions. So I don't want to talk about that too much right now. For the sake of confusing, but that's it in a nutshell. I went over that fast because again, this is in a recorded format, so you can kind of peek at it again, you know, if you need to, and go back and rewatch it double speed if you need to. So, okay, so for loops. All right, I'm going to write another for loop now. I'm going to write this one a little bit differently, and we're going to be iterating a little bit differently. Let's see. Oh yeah. There's an excellent Udacity course that we've been using for our pre-course work. And maybe I can find that link and post that in here as well. They have some excellent resources we've been using. They have some Codecademy and Udacity have had some great. A lot of their content is some great like beginner level content that we've used to. It's like previously we've our students prior to starting the class they've needed to complete. There's been like 3 or 4 Codecademy courses and a Udacity course, and there's some good resources to kind of get started They have a lot of like great resources for like getting you started and getting you familiar with the basics. And so yeah, they have some great stuff that you can go and check out there as well. Okay, all right. So let's look at another for loop example. So with this one, so inside of the for loop, we have those three conditions, or these three sections. These like there's three parts to the for loop. We have our, the value that we're going to be changing, and we have how we're going to change it, and then we have our truth statement that needs to be true to continue the iteration of the loop. And again, when I say iteration, that means just the loop like cycling, like spinning. Like you can think of the for loop as like this little like spinner, like it's going to spin around and it's going to do the same thing over and over and over again. And so as long as a condition is true. So iteration is the word that we use to describe the for loop cycling over and over again. So all right, so inside of this first section, I'm going to say let I is equal to 10. And then inside of the second section, I'm going to say while I is greater than 0, and I'm going to say I minus minus. Okay. So right here, let's see. So right here, what this is going to do is so let's try to think about this for a second before I actually run this. So we have I is going to start at 10. As long as I is greater than 0, we're going to keep running. And then we're going to do I minus minus after each iteration of the loop. So after each iteration, we're going to decrease I by 1. We're going to decrement it. So 10 is going to become 9, and then 8, and then 7. And we're going to keep going until this statement is false. So at what point is this false? As soon as I is equal to 0, then it will be false. So if we run that, we see 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we're iterating backwards. So we went from 10 to 1, whereas before we were doing 1 to 10. And so with our for loops, we can, we have a lot of granularity with how we, with how we do this. And so we could do something like minus equals 2. So we're going to minus equals. So again, minus equals, times equals, plus equals allow you to increase or decrease or multiply, increase a value by by something other than just 1. So plus plus minus minus is just 1. Minus equals is going to let us say 2. So it's going to cut 2 off of it each time. So as I run that, we see 10, 8, 6, 4, 2. So it's going to cut off 2. And so we can get pretty grand, like we have a lot of fine-tuned control with how we do this. Later, when we talk about arrays, get in the callback functions, and we have some other methods that we use that'll replace a lot of your for loop usage. But this concept of iteration and looping is super common. It's one of the fundamental building blocks in programming. So like if statements, branching logic, the logical operators that we talked about today, and then like this iteration, this idea of a for loop. There's different flavors of iteration. Like there's for loops and while loops and do while loops, and then we'll get into for each methods and stuff like that. And they're all slightly different, but they're all around this core idea of looping and repeating a piece of code over and over again. And all programming languages essentially have these same building blocks. And this idea of variables like numbers, strings, Boolean values, logical operators, so and, or, not. This control flow, so if statements, else, if, else if, for loops, iteration. These things are common across pretty much every programming language. So these same concepts are, the syntax might be different, but the concepts are very much the same. And so as you get better and better at JavaScript and achieve mastery with it, a lot of these concepts will apply over into other languages that you wish to learn. And so that's another reason why we take a top-down approach. So we start with JavaScript, and eventually we're getting into C++, which when you're coding in C++, it's way lower to the hardware, and so there's a lot more things you have to keep track of and a lot more considerations you have to have. But it's easier to pick it up because through JavaScript you will have learned the fundamentals of data structures and control flow and these different aspects of programming in general. So again, this idea of iteration and being able to loop and going up to and being able to execute a piece of code a specified number of times is a key concept. Okay. All right. So a lot of people still talking about const and let and var. Yeah, don't use var anymore. Yes, generally now you'll still see it come up, and companies will have different opinions. There'll be different style guides again. So there's an asterisk on that. This is a style guide thing, but most companies that are using ES6, which is pretty much every modern company now, they're all moving to it. And it's becoming standard, being implemented on all the browsers now. So it's not quite as much of a new thing anymore. It's getting adopted pretty widely now, and this will be the standard in the future. Everything will be just ES6 in the future. It just takes some time for all the browsers to update everything, and it's changing. It's a living thing. But yeah, so var, vast majority of companies they don't have their engineers use var anymore. They just use const and then use let. So. But yeah, someone just posted the MDN or Mozilla Developer Network link. MDN is fantastic. That is one of the best, if not the best, resource you can look at for JavaScript questions. Stack Overflow is where they have actual questions and answers going on, but MDN is the place to go for. MDN is the place to go for looking up JavaScript specific questions. So they have the best resources on it. So let me let's see, technologies, JavaScript, and they have all sorts of stuff. So stuff from complete beginners, basics. They talk about how it fits in with the browser and stuff like that, and we go over that quite a bit in our course as well, and the DOM and stuff like that. But for right now, we're not going to really talk about that. But yeah, so you can see here's not and does not equal, which we talked about a little bit today. Equality, assignment. See, they don't even mention the double equals here in their description. But yeah, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, assignment. So again, a single equal sign is just an assignment. It's not comparing any type of equality. Conditionals. So here's our if statement broken down into a very, very simple format. And so it's very easy to understand. And so I would highly recommend you guys check this out. I'm going to post this in the Slack channel real quick. So go check that out. You'll see that there's about a 20-second delay. Text about functions, we'll be going over that, so don't worry about that as much right now. Or events, that's something you don't need to be too concerned with right now. Yeah, if I were to pull up, yeah, they probably. Let's see, looping code, maybe that's it. So anyways, they have some basics about it, but anyway, I haven't looked at this. I'm just kind of going off the. This is me just kind of going off the comments, but anyway, so there's some excellent resources in here. So let is not exactly equal to var. So let's talk about that. There are distinctions there, but let is a little more you can change it. So there are some distinctions, but yeah, you don't have to. Someone asked if you don't have to declare variables of a certain type. You don't. Yeah, dynamically typed. Yep. So yeah, you do not have to specify that. In a lot of other languages, when we get into C++, they're strictly typed, and you have to specify that, and that introduces a whole another layer of complexity. see, const can contain any variable. Just keep in mind that const generally is not changeable. Yes, you cannot change what the variable. If you use const for the variable, you cannot change what it refers to. Let's see. Is there a reason why it specifies something as a string? So you're honestly going to be using strings, I think, more than numbers. Strings are, I don't know. That's not necessarily true, but it's used both all the time. Strings are just like everything on your web page. Like think of Twitter. So like if you're going to send a tweet, the text that you type in is going to be stored as a string. The text of the tweet, your username is stored as a string. Your email and your password are stored as strings inside of the database. The password is hashed and encrypted, of course. We talk a lot about security and like APIs, how to protect them, how to protect your data, how to make sure that your passwords and stuff are secure. To prevent against hacks, and talk about Equifax and all that stuff that happened. We get into some of that stuff and talk about how we can keep your API secure and stuff like that. But you have to specify the type of data that a variable holds, because it can be expensive to check what type it is, and different values behave in different ways. And this is a discussion for another day. I don't want to go too deep into this, but yeah, this is a great discussion you guys are having in there. Don't want to talk about. I'm not going to take too much time to address all of that, because I could talk all night about a lot of these topics. So, all right. So for loop, a couple of the things that I wanted to talk about real quick. So this idea of plus equals and minus equals. So with a string, so if I say let str, I'm going to set equal to an empty string. I can say str plus equals float. And then str plus equals space, str plus equals world, str plus equal exclamation mark. And I can do console.log str like that. Clear, run it, and we see hello world prints out to the console. And so this is called string concatenation. You can add things together with plus equals. You've probably seen it with plus signs, but the plus equal works as well. So plus equal essentially is saying, plus equal is identical to saying, it's like right here, if we said string is equal to str plus whatever this is. So that's what the plus equal is doing. So the plus equals, so like these two lines right here, these are equivalent. So it's a shorthand. There's plus equals, there's minus equals, there is multiplication, like times equals. Those don't make sense with strings. Up the plus sign with a string, we'll do concatenation. But if I did let num is equal to 0, I could do num plus equal 1. So I add 1 to it. And then I could do num times equals 5, and then do num minus equal 3. And so then if we run that, we're going to see 2 is printed out, because we take 0 and then we add 1 to it. And so it's the number 1. We times it by 5, so it's 5. We minus 3. Now it's 2. We print it out. So plus equals, times equals, minus equals. So these are some little shortcuts. You're going to need this for some of the homework. Your homework tonight is a little more is quite a bit more difficult than yesterday's. The homework tonight, there's going to be 10 different problems. So yesterday you had 24. Today there's only 10, but a couple of them are quite a bit trickier than the ones you encountered yesterday. And so as you work through them, I'd encourage you to ask questions in the questions channel, seek help from your peers. We're running a bunch of other classes, so we'll peek in and help as much as we can. so we'll do our best to help out and answer questions. But yeah, just post the questions inside of the questions channel, and we'll walk you through it. The new questions are saved as a draft right now, so as soon as this recording's over, I'm going to go in and I'll release your new questions into the same replit. So the same place you're doing your problems from yesterday, there's essentially just going to be 10 new questions that will be added to that same collection. Yeah. So Andrew Kelly made the comment. Let's see. Oh yeah, for this replit, this is me just like using, this is just a personal replit. It's like a scratch pad, so you guys can see what I'm doing. So I can kind of play around with things. So this is not associated with the homework in any way. Okay, and then someone saying, my thought is that defining the types is safer, but I don't know if I can also use the capabilities of defining that same variable as a constant, etc. Always perhaps that's for another day. Yeah, so declaring a type is a lot safer, and it makes your code a lot more stable. And we go into that in a lot of depth. That's something that you'll understand in depth later on in our course. Yeah, and this stuff right here that we're going over now, this is our essentially our pre-course work. This is the stuff that we want all of our students to understand before they come in. So this is kind of like the base level that we want everyone to know about. We don't want to take time to explain all of this stuff during the course, because we want to start moving at a faster pace and get into stuff that's a little more just a little more advanced, so we can it's a high bar that we need you to reach, and we move at a very fast pace. It's a very, very advanced course. It's difficult. The first 2 weeks are especially difficult. We do a lot of stuff with like data structures and algorithms. We talk about the types of algorithms that are used, in common applications. Like you'll be rebuilding the types of algorithms, not exactly, but some of the ones that, like, you'll learn how Google Maps works and how Google does all of that, and how Google's able to calculate, like your route between different locations. You'll learn how social networks are structured and how those behave. We get into just these building blocks of how all these major and sophisticated applications work, to where you would be able to go in and contribute on that level of a team, and that's the goal. The goal is to be able to raise you to a very, very high level. We want our students to be at Google and Facebook and Amazon and Twitter and and all of the household name tech companies. That's our goal, and that's what we're trying to do as a company. Let's see. ToString. Yeah. So there's a method on strings. If we do x gets 5, and do x.to string. Actually, I think I could just do constants will return a string. So that, yeah. It's hard to tell that it's a string and not a number. I think actually maybe the colors are different. Nope. Yeah, so it's kind of hard to tell that it is strings. I could do a type of, and okay, type of is another funny thing in JavaScript. You have to be careful, and we'll go into this more later. Type of will tell you, so like it'll tell you what data type the value is. So 5 will be a number. String will just be a string. If I do true, it'll be a Boolean. Funny to you, this is called an arrow function. And it doesn't like that. So type of function. Then we're also going to get into objects and things like that. So there's something null. So if you do type of null, it will be type object, which is weird. And if you do a type array, and we'll talk about arrays later, it's also type object. And then if you do type of for an object, it's also object. So there's some weird stuff that goes on there, and we explain why there's differences are there. But yeah, so you have to be careful, really, really careful with types in JavaScript, because it's dynamically typed and it can change and switch. And And so it's so JavaScript is being run by C++, which is a strictly typed language. And so underneath the hood, your strings are very like strictly typed, but there's a lot of code that's written to make it convenient to be able to switch back and forth easily between these different types on variables and stuff like that. So that's something that we actually did go into in the course. We look at the V8 engine, which is the C++ application that runs JavaScript, and we start playing around with that, and you kind of mess around with it and make some modifications to the JavaScript language for fun. So you can see how like new keywords and things like that are added and how it's changed. So anyway, yeah, lots of good questions about type coercion. Yeah, there's something called TypeScript, and there's other things there that introduce stricter typing in the JavaScript. But anyway, don't worry about that too much right now. For loops, just worry about for loops and strings and if statements. Make sure you have those down. Okay, all right. Any last questions before I release the homework? Okay. All right. So let's see. Okay, so I'll go in and I will release the homework, and we'll be working through that. And then tomorrow we'll be getting into some more stuff. So tomorrow, the next day after that, we'll be working through a lot of the basics. We'll be doing arrays, objects, and functions. And when we get into functions, that's when we start getting into higher order functions and arrow functions and some functional programming stuff and closure and callbacks and Lambda functions, where the whole Lambda thing comes from. So, okay. String to int, is that with parse int? Yeah, so you can use the number constructor. So if I do const str is equal to 5, I could do parse int str. That will give us, it will turn into a number. It's hard to tell, but if I do type of, you can see that it gives us a number. So and be careful, it does not turn it into an integer necessarily. Like it, okay, so it turns it into an integer, but numbers in JavaScript are not strictly to like. So this will drop decimals, but like the parseInt function will drop decimals. But there's a difference between what an int means, like in general, and then there's an actual data type in lower level languages called an int. So that's how you use int, like int, instead of just the full word integer. So this right here will turn the string into an integer. So it'll drop decimals, turn it into just a number value. But integers like int in JavaScript is different from int inside of C++, because like an int in C++ is limited with the type of int in C++ is different in that like it's restricted in how big it can be, the type of values that it can hold. So numbers are very different in JavaScript than they are if you have experience in other languages. In JavaScript, a num can be it can be anything, a negative value, it can be 1,000, it could be negative something point something obviously that's not right, but it can be whatever. Whereas in other languages, you have to be very specific, and only certain types of, like for different types of numbers, you have different terms you can use. Okay. Let's see. See any caveats with drawing one type coercion, using type methods. What is talking about mutability? Generally, this is something that's abstracted away in JavaScript, and so it's something that is generally not what you're concerned about. So usually in JavaScript, we're so high up the abstraction tree that like performance gains and losses along those lines are just very, very, very rarely something that you're thinking about. Like if that's something you're concerned with, you're maybe making some type of library, or like you're a senior level developer working with people architecting some type of library, and that's something that you're more concerned with. So it's something that when we get lower into like C++ stuff like that, then it's something that you're more concerned with. But within JavaScript specifically, that's not something that we're concerned with right now. But good questions. All right. Okay. Well, thanks everyone. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. And then, so you can do uint errors. Yeah, so you can get into specific types of, there are some specific types of like other arrays you can access, and MDN talks about that. But that's beyond the scope of what I want to talk about right now. Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll go over arrays. All right.